So the constraint demo today is going to be how to manage a complex constraint setup. So normally, for example, on these streams, we've done some constraint setups where we pick something up and put something down. So for example, pick up my water bottle, put it down. That's pretty simple. I might pick up my phone and just hold that. And I might want to be able to rotate it from different points. So have an animatable pivot point. Okay, I can do that. Or for example, a pen, being able to do this. Okay, that's pretty good. And those are really fun to do, at least for me. I love doing those types of constraints. But they're still, on the whole, pretty simple because it's one constraint, just turning on and off or just moving. But what about constraints where we have more complexity? A character is manipulating two objects that are constrained and then lifting one off, changing hands, all of that stuff. How do we manage that? So this was actually a question that someone asked me, and the situation that they have is, let's see, I have it here. Their character, I got props today. I got prepared for the stream. So the character is holding a tray in one hand. They've got a glass on the tray. Now, hopefully I don't break this. They've got the glass there. They have to walk in. They have one free hand that has to grab the glass, take it off, put it down on the table, come back up, grab the tray, and then hold it against their body. So we've got one constraint from the hand to the tray. The glass has to follow the tray at the beginning. We then have to have a constraint here and then turn off the constraint between the glass and the tray. This constraint has to then turn off again. Then we have to take this hand and these constraints on both hands here working. And then not only that, constrain the tray to the body so that as the character is holding the tray to their body, we can do this. And we're not doing this kind of thing where the body's moving and the tray just stays locked in place. They're holding it against their body, so it has to move with their body. That's a lot. That's a big constraint setup. Already we're at least at 4 or 5 constraints, just kind of off the top of our head here. How do we manage that? How do we plan for it? How do we even begin? That's a lot of stuff to do. So that's going to be the goal for today. I want to show how I would approach this constraint setup. I'm not going to do any animation because we're not going to have time for that. But I do want to show how I would approach this and the way I would think through it. Because that's the most important thing with constraints is just like animation, you want to plan for it. If you don't plan your constraints, you can get them to work. There's more than likely you're going to get something that works just fine. But the more complex the constraint setup gets, like what we have right here, the less room for error we have. Because if we make one mistake halfway through, we might have to redo the whole constraint setup again and again and again. And that gets very tedious very, very quickly. So making sure you have that constraint setup thought out and planned will help you approach it much more quickly and efficiently. Now, with that, it's going to be one of those things where when you first start learning animation, you're not going to know how to make a constraint, so you're not going to know how to plan to make a constraint. It takes time. You have to kind of learn as you go, and the more you learn, the more you're going to be able to plan more efficiently, and the more efficient you're going to become overall. So, this is not something that I expect anyone to just get like right off the bat and just, yeah, go for it. But it is something worth practicing because the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. The other thing to keep in mind with this and with this demo that I'm going to be showing here today is that I'm going to be showing this the way I would do this if I had no plugins. So if I just had straight Maya or Blender, I'm assuming there'd be some alternative that you could do that's similar to this. If you have something like Animbot, that would change things quite a bit With Animbot, there's some tools that you could use to help simplify this and make it go a little bit faster. But we don't always have Animbot on hand. Depending on the studio, depending on where you're working, depending on the program you're using. Again, at Maya or Blender or Cinema 4D, you might not have tools like Animbot, which are wonderful tools. Like, I love Animbot, but it's not always a constant, unfortunately. So the goal here today is going to be, how would I set this up with base constraints? And I'm just trying to put that tray down without having it crash. So that's going to be the goal. I'm not sure how long this demo is going to take. It shouldn't take all that long, but hopefully it'll be interesting, and hopefully it'll kind of give ideas of how to approach not just this specific constraint setup, but just constraint setups in general, and specifically complex constraint setups. So with that, let's actually just jump right in. Since we've done all of this introduction, let's jump right in here. So this is the scene that I've set up. I set this up just a few minutes before the stream. So the posing is going to be a little wonky from certain angles, but oh well. So we have our character here. She's holding the tray. We've got a glass right there that she has to grab and then pull up and then place it down. I didn't put a table. I should put a table, but that'll be fine for now. And then hold the tray back to her body. So we've got most of our elements here. You know what? I said, I'm just going to add a quick table anyway. It's going to bother me if I don't. So she's going to put it like on a bar or something. Bar top. There we go. So we've got all of our elements here. And actually I should call this bar top. Always name your objects. It's a very good habit to get into. So we've got our setup. We've got our elements. Great. What do we need to do first? Well, first, and if you've seen any of my constraint demos, you'll know this step already, but I'll cover it anyway for anyone who doesn't. First, we need to make sure that our objects and our props are properly rigged. For me, I will almost never constrain a prop or piece of geometry directly to the rig. If I'm taking the geometry, like a polygon cube, and constraining it or parenting or doing some sort of constraint setup to the character, I'm not a fan. I want to have a control curve that I can use to move the object. So I've already set this up here. So you can see here, I've got the tray and I've got a control curve, and then I've got an offset control right here. Now, why do I have an offset control? Well, that just allows me to change my pivot point. So for example, right now, if I just set this here to default, the tray would rotate from its center right there. That's really nice. But let's bring back my prop. I knew it was a good reason to bring props. What if, instead of having my hand here, which, okay, now it's rotating from the center, what if my hand was over here? Well, now that tray is rotating from this end, right there. I need to be able to adjust that. I need to be able to animate that. So by having this offset control right here, I can just move that over, and now I'm rotating from that end right there. So now I have an adjustable pivot point. That is great. So how do you set this up? Well, it's very simple. All you need is your prop. I'm just going to do a polygon cube here. And then two control curves. So create NURBS primitive circle right there. And I'm going to duplicate that and make a second one right here. Now, whenever you rig something, it's very important to delete the history and make sure you freeze their transformations. So deleting history, make sure that there's no construction history. Essentially, the elements that go to making this object, we want to nuke those out so that nothing kind of in the history of the object can cause issues. So we do this by going to edit, delete by type, history, right there. Now, we take our objects and we have to freeze their transformations. because their default values right now are not default. You can see the scale here is 35.981. That's not a default value. And if ever I had to reset my rig into position, I might just screw things up. So taking all of your objects here and then going to modify, freeze transformations, we'll reset those back to a default value and essentially just make it like this is the size that the object is. That's it. There's no extra changes in there. So from there, it's pretty simple. You definitely want to name your object. So I'm going to call this box. And then we're going to have the box root control. You can name these whatever you want. It could be layout, it could be cog, it could be whatever you want. I just typically go with Bob the box. Yes, I should have gone with Bob. So it's my root control. That's my main control to move this. And then this is going to be my box offset right there. The offset control is what's going to allow us to adjust the pivot point, offset the pivot point. So from there, I've got all three objects here. All I need to do is parent the offset control to the root control here. So you can see it's underneath there. So now if I take that root control, everything moves. And then I'm going to take the box and I'm going to constrain it to the offset control. So take the offset control here, then the box, constrain, parent right there. And make sure my parent options are reset. There we go. So now it follows along. There we go. That's it. I've now got a rigged object that I can now move the pivot point. So right here by default, you'll notice that the box rotates from its center. But if I needed to rotate it from the top or maybe the corner here, I can just move this and let's see, get it a little closer. So somewhere around there. And now I can rotate it from that corner. I've got an animatable pivot point. Done. So that's really the basics of it. And that's what I've done for the tray here, as well as for the glass. So if you look at the glass here, it's got the same thing. Now I did go a little bit overboard with this glass and I actually rigged it up so I can actually change the water level and like, animate the the water. I had a little bit of fun before the stream, so I was just kind of playing around with things. I can add a little bit of splash in there, so we get a little bit of waves through there. So now we can just get some nice water effect in there. Super quick, super simple. You don't have to do that. That was just me goofing around because I had a few extra minutes. So essentially, we have those two circles. That's the big thing. Okay, cool. Now we've got everything rigged. We've got everything prepped. Now we have to do the constraints. Wow, how do we do that? What do we do? Well, for me personally, I actually draw it out. So I used to do this on pencil and paper. Nowadays, I just do it in Clip Studio Paint, for example. So, for example, my usual steps will be first, write out the steps. So what do I need to have happen in this constraint setup? I know that the tray is going to lead the right hand. So this is the first thing. What leads what in our shot? Is the hand going to lead the tray? Is the hand going to lead the glass? Is the glass going to lead the hand? What is controlling what? Now, for me personally, something like this, I want the objects to be in control of the hands, not the other way around. The reason for this is if ever we have to have some sort of interaction. So just looking at the tray, for example, if I'm trying to animate the tray, it's so bright. Look at that. It's just shining the light right on my face. Got distracted. Shiny things, they distract me. So I've got my hand here and I've got the tray on top. I want all of the arcs of the tray to be nice and smooth as the waiter goes through the room. If I'm doing this from the wrist, this is going to be a pain because I'm going to have to deal with all of these rotations here from the wrist and then the translations over top of it. Trying to get an arc here on that tray is going to be a pain. If I can animate it from the tray itself, I can easily get those arcs going through. And not only that, but the hand is going to just follow very nicely and drag beautifully with it. I'm not going to have to try and rotate the wrist, then translate it, and I could get these weird disconnects where the tray just wobbles in there. Now, more importantly, is when we have both hands controlling the tray. If I have one hand here that is leading the tray and then this hand is following the tray or following this hand, I'm going to be doing this, where I'm rotating this hand and the other one is swinging around. And that's going to be really hard to get to feel natural. You're going to feel like this hand here is just swinging everything around and like fanning it. It's going to feel strange. If the tray is the one leading, I can just move my pivot point because we rigged it up so we can animate the pivot point. Move my pivot point right in between, right here. And now I can rotate it from that center point as if both hands are controlling it. And I can do this and flap it from this point and not from the wrist and get these weird rotations. It's a nice, simple, clean rotation. Now, even more important than that, let's say we have the glass. When the character picks up the glass, we don't want the pivot point to be up here because if we do that, the rotations are going to be a pain. So for example, if I'm trying to rotate this up here, and I'm rotating from my wrist, let's say I grab the glass here and then try to animate it being picked up. It's just going to slide out like this. Oh no, I want it to balance on the edge. So I have to rotate the wrist, bring this back down, rotate it again, bring it back down. Oh, too far. Rotate it down, bring it back up, put into position. It's a pain. Same thing with putting the glass down. I want to get that nice roll, contact, roll. If I'm doing from the wrist, contact, oh, rotation, oh, got to translate, rotate, got to translate. It's a pain. If I'm leading with the glass, I can literally just put my pivot point right here, get that nice roll off, lift off, move my pivot point to the top right here. So now it's swinging from the top right there. And then as it goes down, again, move my pivot point right before contact, doop, boop, done. So by having the objects lead in this situation, I can make my whole life a lot easier and I'm not going to be fighting these random rotations of the wrist. The other thing is if ever you need to offset something. So for example, if I'm going to hold the glass and I have my character like do this, where they move their hand like that, that's going to be a pain if the hand is leading because you have to animate the hand. So you do this and then you have to counter animate the glass like that to keep it in place. And when you're polishing, that glass is going to wiggle like crazy. Or you animate the glass, it stays there, and the hand just goes whoop, around, and all I have to do is add a little extra wiggle on the glass, done. Nice and easy. So in these cases, leading with the objects is going to be way easier. So going back to our list here, we know that the tray is going to lead in my shot the right hand, the character's right hand. Second thing, the glass has to follow the tray at the beginning. It's going to be on the tray as they're moving. Third, the left hand goes up and grabs the glass, and as it grabs it, the glass then leads the hand. So even though visually the hand is grabbing, the constraint is the glass leading the hand, so it grabs on, and now everything's going to move together right there, at least for a few frames. From there, the glass leaves the tray, they pick it up. Now we've got that disconnect. The glass then gets put down on the table, which means that the hand has to let go. Glass is released. And then both hands come up onto the tray before the tray is then pushed onto the body and follows the body. So I have my order of events here. This is very important because now I can start planning which one is the constraint that I should set up first. I can see which ones are going to need a little bit more work. For example, Trey leading the right hand right here. That's not going to change. The hand is going to follow that tray throughout the whole shot. It's going to adjust its position, yes, because it goes from underneath to the side, but it just follows the tray the whole time. Everything else, though, we're going to have some constraints turning on and off and all of that good stuff. So once I have this, the next thing is understanding what kind of constraint you want. Now for this, the constraint I'm going to go for is what I typically call a universal constraint. It's a constraint setup that I'll use that tends to work pretty much for most cases. It's a little bit more complex than a simple constraint, but it'll give me exactly what I need throughout the whole thing. So just to kind of explain it here, you're going to have your object that follows right there. So this is going to be, for example, the hand that's following the glass. It's going to be constrained to a locator. That locator is parented to another locator, which is parented to another locator, which is constrained to the glass in this case. Why? I've done a whole demo on this. I've done a whole stream just on this constraint setup here. So if you want more information, I would definitely recommend checking that out. But a quick explanation. Why the heck are we doing this? Why is it so complex? There's kind of two reasons here. Multiple reasons, honestly, not just two. Many reasons. So many reasons. So the first thing, why do we have constraints on both ends here? That seems a little odd. A lot of times when you read about constraints, it's just going one way. So for example, you just constrain the follow object to the lead object or to a locator and then just parent that locator to the lead object. Done. Why do we have to have this weird constraint here? The reason for that is for your hierarchy in Maya. If we don't constrain this object here, all of these locators are going to be placed into the hierarchy of the lead object. That's going to make them hard to find, and it's also going to make them impossible to turn off correctly. And we're going to have to do more work because of that. So just as a quick example here, if I was to create a locator right here, and let's move it up right there. Where are you, locator? There we go. So we've got our locator right here. You can see it in the outliner right there. If I was to constrain it, or sorry, parent it, if I was to just parent it to this hand right here, watch in the outliner what happens. It's gone. The locator is poof, gone. I can't find it in the outliner anymore. I can see it visually here, but what if I accidentally turned off its visibility right there? How do I find it again? How do I select it? I would have to dig through the rig. So I still had it selected so I can find it here, but I would have to dig through all of this just to find that locator so I could do something with it. I hate that. I do not like that at all. It is annoying and it's just a waste of time to me. For me, when I look at my constraints, I want to be able to see where they are and be able to work on them right away, even if they're hidden. So if I constrain this, for example, so now we're going to take the hand and constrain the locator to it, constrain parent, the locator stays right there. That's why we have that extra constraint. It keeps our hierarchy nice and clean. Okay, so that's what this lock locator is for. It is essentially there to attach the whole constraint setup to whatever is leading. So we have that. Okay. Now we have two other locators, anim and offset. Well, that's the exact same thing that we were doing on our props earlier. So we had our little box here. And then we made 2 control rings around that. Well, that was our anim control, the big one, or I called it the root. And then we had the offset. Essentially, that gives us the ability to adjust our pivot points. By having these 2 locators here, we are going to be able to adjust the pivot point and the way of manipulating our constraint. So we're not just stuck with holding something and then it's glued there and you can't adjust it whatsoever. It's going to give us pretty much all the freedom we need to have any type of interaction we want. So this is what's going to allow us to hold the glass here and then rotate it like that, or go from the bottom to the top like so. So that's what those 2 locators are for. And they're parented right here because parenting will allow us to keep animating them. And then we take our object that follows. In this case, it's going to be the hands. And we're going to constrain those locators because if something is rigged, you have to constrain it. So very quick overview, hopefully made a little bit of sense. If you haven't used constraints before, it probably made no sense at all. And it's just like, what the heck? Why so many steps? Hopefully, as I go through this, it's going to make a little bit more sense as you see it happening and why we're doing it. But this is the goal that we're aiming for right now. So let me clean this up a little bit here. Okay, so now once I have all of this, normally I don't have to do this step here because I know how to do constraints. But if it can be helpful to just write this out. The next thing I do is I just do some quick drawings. So in this case, I just did some drawings of the hands, the glass, the tray, and the body. So I just put some little icons here, and then I'll just plan it out. And just one step at a time. So the simplest one is going to be the screen, or the character's right hand, that one there. So here are the controls. We've got the IK controls here, and then we've got the main controls for the glass, the main control for the tray, and then we've got the spine control that we're going to need to attach this to. Okay, so let's start with the simple hand, just hand to the tray. Well, if we think back to our constraints that up here, so there we go. We have our follow object, that's going to be the hand. We're going to need 3 locators, constrained on both ends and parented in the middle, like that. Well, that's going to be this. So we're going to have our 3 locators. Our IK hand is going to be constrained to the first locator, parent to parent, and then this other one is going to be constrained down to the tray. That's going to get it to follow. Now, the other thing that I do here is I plan out the names as well. This is just so that when I go into Maya, I can start naming things and keep track of everything. And I can also look at my image and go, wait, which one's which? And kind of make sure everything's working. So we have the right hand RH offset control. This is going to be the one that allows us to move the pivot point. We've got the right hand animation control. That's the thing that we're going to actually animate if we do need to adjust the hand when it's constrained. And then we've got the, in this case, RG lock. So I named it lock because it's going to be the thing that's locking, constraining this whole setup, the whole hand to the tray. Now, why is it RG? Because I can use this for the glass as well. So the glass has to be constrained as well. Okay. But they're both being constrained to the same tray. And the glass, the whole thing that it's doing is it's turning off a constraint and then boop, it goes away. That's it. Well, I could make another 3 locators here, but why? If this locator here is just there to sit and lock objects to this surface, I could just reuse it. So the glass is going to be the same thing, but now we're going the opposite way. So now we've got the glass constrained to a locator, and you can see, again, we've got those 3 locators right there. Offset, anim, and then the lock. We're just reusing one to save some space and not have a ton of extra locators. And both of these, the hand and the glass, are going to be following the tray. There we go. Done. So that's pretty simple so far. Already, I say pretty simple. We're dealing with 5 locators and 3 constraints as well as 4 parent operations. It's not that simple. But what this is going to give us is the ability to animate this however we want. If that tray has to like shake and the glass has to wobble on top of there, I can use the anim control and the offset control to get that pivot point and just get that perfect shake in there, no problem. If it has to slide around on the tray, I can do that. If the character's hand has to pick it up and slide it off of the tray, I can do that as well, and everything still stays together. This is going to give me all the control I need to animate this. Okay, so hopefully this makes sense so far. Now, the other thing we have to keep in mind is how are things going to move and switch and change throughout the shot. So this whole section here doesn't change. It's going to stay on the whole time. The glass has to leave. It has to come off of the tray. And then I need to animate the glass going down. Okay. What do I do to do that? I can just turn this constraint on and off right there. So this constraint, it's going to start on. Let's actually do this on a different layer here, so it's not so gray. Beep, beep. Okay. So this is going to start on, and then I'm just going to turn it off at some point. Boop. And suddenly, this is disconnected from everything else, and the glass is free, and it can do its own thing. It can lead the other hand and go down on the surface. Done. It is disconnected from the tray. I don't need that anymore. So on, then off. There we go. Okay. So this one here, it doesn't need anything. It's going to stay on the whole time. Now, what about the left hand? Okay. The left hand is going to take a little bit more work because remember, it has to start free. It's on its own. Then it has to grab the glass, which means that it's going to be constrained to the glass. The glass is going to lift off, go down on the table. Then that hand has to let go. So the constraint turns off. And then it has to come back to the tray and then be constrained to the tray. Okay. That means we're going to have multiple constraints. We're going to have to constrain it to the glass, then the tray. Okay, does that mean I have to have 3 locators here and 3 locators here? Alrighty, that's complex. Not really. Because we're using this universal constraint setup where we have constraints on both ends here. So we have a constraint at the following object and the constraint at the lead object. I can actually do this. 3 locators, same setup as before. The hand constrained to the offset, offset parented to the anim, anim parented to the lock, and then that lock constraint, I can constrain to 2 separate objects and just switch which objects it's following when I need it to. So essentially what I'm going to have is a switch here at some point where it goes from this first to this second. So it switches from the glass to the tray. And then when the hand is free, I can just turn this constraint on and off. So it's actually going to start off, the hand is free. Then it turns on right there when it's set to number 1. It's going to let go of the glass once it's on the table, off again, and then turn on again when it's set to number 2, right there, the tray. So I can reuse my entire constraint setup and switch it. Now, at this point, probably if some of you haven't done constraints before, at this point is like, okay, I'm not following this at all and makes no sense. And I don't blame you. It is confusing. But essentially, what we're doing is we're trying to save ourselves work and try to avoid having tons of extra constraints. Because imagine if I have a character maybe playing some sort of like cup game where there's like the upside down cups and they're like looking underneath them, put it down, look under another one, put it down. But maybe instead of just 3 cups, there's like 20 cups and they're like picking up another one, picking up another one, picking up another one. And they're just going through the whole thing. If I have to do a separate constraint setup for every single cup, and that's the wrong control there. If I have to do like 3 locators for every single cup just to get that hand constrained, 20 cups, I'm going to have 60 locators in one scene just to lift up these cups. Ugh, no, it's a pain. Instead, if I can just switch which cup my constraint setup is following, done. I can just essentially have a selection of switches and go, okay, it's going to follow cup 1, cup 2, cup 3, cup 4, and just switch it whenever I need the character to pick it up. Done. So this is going to give me a lot more simplicity in the long run and more control. Okay. So we've got all of this now. Great. We have one more. Just realized I have a little line here for nothing. The body. So now the tray has to take all of this. So now we've got this turned onto 2 right there. Both hands are on the tray, and now the tray has to press against the body and hold there. Well, that's just another constraint set up here. So now the tray is going to be constrained to an offset control, which is parented to an anim, parented to a lock, which is constrained to the chest, and it's going to follow the chest control. Now, which chest control do you follow? It depends on where the character is pressing the weight of the tray into. If it's at their stomach, use the stomach control. If it's near the upper chest, you can use the upper chest control. If it's something specific, like putting your finger like right there, you're going to want to use a point on poly or a rivet constraint so it stays right there. Because we're just kind of wanting the general chest area, body area, we can just use that upper chest control. So this is the constraint setup that we're going to need for this. Now, do you need to do all of this? Do you need to go this far? No. You could go super simple. You could just take all the controls, constrain them directly right there, and then this would be constrained to 2 things, and we just switch it, and then this gets constrained there. Done. Wow, wouldn't that be nice and simple? Yes, it would be very simple, and honestly, there's nothing technically wrong with it, except that we would lose a ton of ability to simplify our animation and to polish our shot. We might save some time now in the setup phase, but when it comes time to polish that glass contacting on the table here, we're going to be spending hours, maybe not hours, it depends on how it's going, but let's say you have a character just doing this, kind of rocking the glass on the table. To polish that would literally take hours if you're trying to do it with the wrist. You're going to be like putting locators there to mark your positions, and it's going to be a nightmare. Or if I have my setup correct, it would take literal minutes. Just a few minutes, boop, 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 done, polished, everything is good. And I can even add some extra finger polish on there without affecting anything. So a little bit more time spent here now making this horribly convoluted constraint setup is going to make it so that polish is a snap in a lot of cases. So that's the goal here. That's why we're doing this. because we want to be able to control our animation and not have to fight our animation. So with this, I'm going to create a new window here and just drag this onto my other monitor, just so I can keep track of all the names and make sure that we're following the exact naming. Let's see. There we go. So at this point, we've got everything planned out. Now we just need to put it into play here in Maya. Now, when you're going into Maya, the first thing I always recommend is, at least if you're setting up your constraints, make sure you've got your starting poses. In general, it's not always the case, but it's usually good to try and create your constraints where the character is actually going to pick the object up or put it down. It makes it a lot easier to animate. Now, ideally, you should also have your animation. So usually before I even start constraining, I'll just do a blocking pass of my whole shot with 0 constraints, just to make sure it all works. Because what's the point of doing all of this constraint stuff just to find out halfway through the shot, oh, that doesn't even work at all. I'm going to have to change that whole hand. It's not going to pick up the glass. They're just going to slide the glass off of the tray or something like that. Suddenly I did all of these constraints and I have to delete them, and it's just a pain. So I will usually do a full blocking pass first, make sure everything's working. Once I have that, then I can create my constraint setup knowing that I've got what I want, and I'm going to have my poses throughout my animation of, okay, here's where the character's picking up the glass, here's where they're putting them down, here's where the character's grabbing onto the tray. I'm going to have all of that. I don't have that here today. I just have this one pose. So we're going to make do. Now, just to make sure, I am going to key everything here, just in case. Maybe I do decide to animate something a little bit here. Okay. So we've got our setup here. Let's start creating the constraint. And actually, just because this might be helpful for everyone to see, I'm just going to show both of these. That way we can actually follow along right there. So, let's see. Let's start with the right hand. So the right hand has to follow the tray. So that's the hand down below here. Make sure, there we go. So this hand has to follow the tray. Well, we have our 3 locators. Let's actually just create those. So locators down here. Let's move that up without moving the tray. There we go. I'm just going to scale that up and duplicate them. Okay. So let's name these. This is going to be RH offset, RH anim, and then RG lock, because it's the right hand and the glass. So we've got that. Where do we put these? Well, the lock one honestly doesn't matter. You could put this anywhere. I could put this down through the floor. I could put it through the ceiling. It doesn't matter where this locator is. The only purpose of this locator, the lock locator, is so that you can essentially constrain everything. That's it. It just turns the constraint on and off. That's all we need. Now, for me personally, I like to usually put it above the object. Now, I could just do this right here, bip, bip, like that. But I also do like to line it up to the object, especially if it's rotated or whatnot, just to keep things nice and clean. So with this object selected, I'm going to select the controls here, go to Modify, Match Transform, Match All Transforms right there. And then just take that locator and move it up right there. I'm just going to put it right around here for now. So we've got that in place. Okay, let's get the other ones in place. Now the offset control, where do I want that? For me, typically, if it's with the hands, I want it in the wrist control, because this is going to essentially give me another wrist control. I can just move the wrist as if it's the wrist. That's really good. I'm not rotating the hand from some weird random position. So I'm going to take this offset, take the IK hand here. Once again, modify, match transforms, match all transforms. There we go. That locator now is perfectly lined up with that wrist. Great. Now, what about this one? The anim control. This is the one where you really have to think, where do I want this? The anim control here is going to be where our pivot point is going to be, where we want things to move from. So if she's holding this tray here, potentially I would want this to line up with her fingers right here. So potentially like right along that tray right there, and maybe rotate it so that it's in line with her finger right through there. Now, do you have to get your positioning perfect? No, because we do have that offset control, so we can readjust where that's going to be. But try to get it as close as possible early on. It's going to be easier. So, with this, we've got our setup. Okay, so let's actually set things up. So if we watch this, the wrist is constrained to the offset control, okay? When you're constraining something, you select the object that leads, then the object that follows. So locator, then wrist, constrain, parent, right there. So now let's test that. That works. I'm selecting the locator and I'm moving the wrist. Okay, the offset control gets parented to the anim control. With parenting, you select the child, the object that follows, then the parent. Good parenting always puts the child first, if you ever want to remember that. So child, then parent, hit P on the keyboard or go to edit parent. And now you can see it's in the hierarchy right there. And if I move this control, I can now adjust the hand and pivot it from this point right there. So now I've got my pivot point on the bottom of the tray, which is really nice. I can now take this anim control and I'm going to parent it to the lock. Again, right here, anim to the lock, just parent that. There we go. So now it is following this control up here. What does that mean? If I move the tray, nothing, because I forgot one more constraint. This is the big thing. We need that last constraint there. I put the lock in place, but I didn't do anything with it. The lock control now needs to be constrained to the tray. So take this locator here and the tray. Again, constraining, you take the object that follows, then the object that leads. Sorry, object that leads, then the object that follows. I told myself, get it right, and I got it backwards. Object that leads, then object that follows. So tray, then locator, constrain, parent. There we go. Now what do we have? That. The hand follows the tray. We're all good to go. And later on, when the hand has to reposition itself and grab onto the tray, let's actually do that maybe on frame 10 here. I'm just going to select all of this, set a key, make sure none of my constraints turned off. Always double check your constraints when you set a key because you might have turned something off by accident. So double check here. Okay, cool. So by the end of the shot, the character is going to need to reposition her hand and hold on to the edge of the tray. Because of this constraint setup that I have, I can just move my anim locator right to the edge of the tray here. Let's actually take the whole tray and kind of rotate it up here as well. It's going to cut through things for now, but that's fine. So I can just put this locator in place right around here. And then take my offset and position the hand onto the tray. Right through there. Let's get that in right there. There we go. So now the character's holding onto the tray here in a new position. If I need to adjust my pivot point right there, it's super easy because it's right there on the edge of the tray. And I can just animate my tray. Not only that, but if I want my pivot point up higher on the tray, because I had rigged it earlier, I can just move this down here, then move this back up. And this is where you just have to do a little bit of readjusting there. Beep. There we go. Now, the tray can be animated from this point here, and the hand is holding on. So, there we go. Now, it looks like I forgot to set a key somewhere. Which control did I forget to set a key on? This one. So let me undo here, because we don't really need that key on frame 10 anyway. Unlimited undos. I love it. Okay. There we go. But you can see how we have that full control now. We can actually animate the character going from underneath the tray onto the side without having to do any extra things to it. That is huge. Okay, let's do the next thing. So the glass. Well, the glass is going to be very similar. So let's make 3 new locators. And already you're going to notice, oh geez, they're all going to be the same color again. It's all going to be hard to see, especially like they're going to start overlaying through each other. Well, for every kind of group, I like to change the colors typically. So for this one, this is going to be the glass. I'm going to open up the attribute editor, go to Object Display. This is for the locator. Drawing overrides, enable override, and then just change the color. You can either use the index color here, which is just a preset colors, or you can open up the RGB and actually pick whichever color you want. So let's actually make these, let's see, the controls are red, so let's make these maybe pink. There we go. So the glass is going to have pink locators. So I'm going to make 2 of these. We already have the lock attribute right there, the lock locator, I should say. So that's already set. We don't need to do anything else there. All I need is the offset and the anim. So let's call these here. So glass offset. I can spell. There we go. Glass anim. Okay. So with this, again, we just have to position these where we want that pivot point to be, or those controls to be. In this case, for the glass, let's see. As she's picking it up, unless she's going to pick it up perfectly, like she grabs it and just boom, pulls it up, I'd probably want it close to the edge. I want a pivot point near the edge so she can grab it and then pull it slightly right there. So I'm actually going to take my anim control. I'm going to match it to my glass here. Match transformations is an awesome tool. And then I'm just going to move this to one of the edges. And I'm just going to kind of base this off of where her arm is. She's most likely going to pull it this way. So let's line up that edge right there. Okay, cool. Take my offset one, and I'm just going to place this in the center of the glass. Right there. Let's just bring this up a little bit. I can also make it a little bit smaller so it's not as painful to select right there. And there we go. That's all we need for now. So let's do the constraint setups. So the glass, the root control of the glass is going to follow the the offset locator right there. So if we're constraining, object that leads first. So that means the locator, then the root control here. Constrain parent. Now the offset locator follows the anim locator. This is why drawing it out can be helpful, because when you're trying to keep track of all this in your mind, it can kind of start getting a lot. So child, then parent, hit P. And now the anim locator is going to follow the lock locator right up here. Hit P. Okay. Did this work? Let's see. Well, there we go. The glass is following the tray. If I needed to, I could have it animated and sliding around on top of the tray. So I could even like do this and then whoop, and you do the whole effect right there. And my liquid rig is working well. It's staying level even though the glass is at an angle. So yay. So we've got all of that. Great. But not only that, as she picks it up, I'm going to be able to animate this glass. There we go. Tilting from that edge and then being picked up. So that's going to be super easy. I can just go nice and easy. I don't have to do these weird rotations and whatnot with the wrist. Okay, cool. So we've got that, but the glass has to be let go at some point. I can't have the glass going out here and still following the tray. So what do I do there? Well, that's pretty simple. All I need to do is, let's go here, frame 5. Actually, let's go to 2. Give ourselves some room. So at this point, let's say the glass has to be picked up. What I would end up doing is I would animate this going up here. And then once it leaves the tray, all I need to do is take my root control for the glass right here, turn off my blend parent. Let's actually make sure I key that on frame 1. I feel like I missed some controls on frame 1, so I'm going to key that again. Always a good thing to do. So I'm going to take this, set that to 0 as she picks up, and now it's free. We can see that right here. It's doing its own thing. So now the glass can come through. Because I've rigged it, I can adjust my pivot point so it's at the top here as she's holding it. She can put it down. As she puts it down, I would adjust my pivot points right here. So I'm doing it super roughly, but now it's going towards the edge so I can place it down nicely. Done. I've got essentially a setup that allows me to do all of that right there. There we go. Okay. So by this point, the glass is going to be, let's put it on the table here. Okay, cool. So we've got that right through there, and I used the wrong control. Use the root control, that'll help. There we go. So with all of that, we've got a tray that works. Everything's following along. Then glass down. There we go. Now, once the glass is down, what we could also do if we wanted to is turn off the visibility on our other locators right here, because those aren't needed anymore. The ones that were holding the glass, once it's gone, they're just there. So I can turn that off, and this is again why it's nice to have them here, because I can always find them super easily. I don't have to dig through a hierarchy. Right there, my glass locators, boom, done. Okay, so we've got that. Great. We've done the right hand, we've done the glass. Both of those are ready to be animated and polished. Let's do the left hand. The left hand is going to be the tricky one because it has to switch from one thing to another. It also has to be free, then grab on, then let go. It's going to be kind of a pain. So let's approach this. First up, let's just create the first constraint setup. Get the hand onto the glass. So I just saw the username chocolate mayonnaise, man. That's an awesome username. So once again, we need our locators, and we're going to make 3 new ones. Now, could we just use the RG lock up here? No. The reason why we can't use that is because we are switching the entire constraint setup from following the glass to following the tray. So to do that, we need a totally new independent setup here. So first off, let's change the colors. What are we going to do here? Maybe let's do bright blue. Okay. So I'm just going to duplicate these here, right there, and then let's name them. So we're going to have left hand lock. We're going to have left hand anim. And we're going to have left hand offset. Right there. Okay. So once again, let's start with the lock. Where does the lock go? Wherever we want it to go. It doesn't really matter. So because it's going to be following the tray at the end, I'm just going to put it above the tray just as a general kind of positioning here. So I'm going to select that, then the tray, match the transforms, and then just beep, move it up here. There we go. Done. So, and how do you match the position when you change the pivot point of an object? You should just be able to use the match transforms here, and it should match it up. So from there, let's do the left hand anim. So left hand anim is, where is this going to pivot point? Where do I want this hand to move from? Well, and hey, thank you so much, Mystic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's awesome. Thank you. So the pivot point here is going to be at the glass, because I want the hand, if it's holding like this, I want the hand to be able to do this. Rotate around the top of the glass, not up here. Because if I have to do a small adjustment, that's going to be a pain to have to readjust everything versus just doing this. So I'm going to match the position here to the glass. So take the locator, then the glass, match the transforms, and then I'm just going to move this up, oops, just the locator, right to the top of the glass, right around there. Yeah, somewhere around there. So with that, I can now rotate it. So I don't just line it up to the glass. I want to rotate it to the wrist, because if I try to rotate it now, you'll notice that it doesn't line up with the angle of the hand. That's going to make it kind of a pain to adjust the wrist. So I'm just going to rotate this here just to be in line with the hand here. Close enough. So when I rotate it, it's going to rotate with that whole hand there. And maybe let's go a little less here. So I want to rotate it with the angle of the hand, not the arm. So somewhere around there. I could even tilt it slightly to match that hand even more. Okay, so something like that. Now, a good thing to double check is make sure you're not getting any gimbal lock as you're doing that. Yeah, so I'm getting close to gimbal lock here. I might want to just reset my rotations there. Or, more specifically, switch my rotation order. Now, rotation order, I've done a whole talk on that. I'm not going to go over that right here, just because that's a whole other thing. Let's see. There we go. But essentially, changing your rotation order will allow you to avoid gimbal lock and make your rotations a lot easier to manage. So it's always a good thing to double check. Okay, so we've got that in place. That's going to help me adjust the hand. And Aetha J, always with the awesome links. Just a resource of information. Now, the offset control, that just matches the wrist. So once again, take the offset, the wrist, match the transforms, done. So there we go. Now I just need to do all the constraints. So hand to the offset. That means I select the offset control, then the hand, because it's going to be a constraint. Object that leads, then object that follows. Constrain parent. So let's double check that. Yay, it works. Now the offset gets parented to the anim control. Hit P. Anim control gets parented to the lock control. And then the lock control gets constrained to the tray. So tray, then that, constrain parent. There we go. Now, actually, before we do that, I took a step ahead. Remember, and this is why I drew these other notes and I forgot to turn it on. Not these ones, these ones. Number 1 is the glass. We need the hand to be constrained to the glass, not the tray. So let's undo that here. So that's free now. Let's constrain that to the glass. So glass control, and then constrain that. Now, if you constrain it to the offset controls of the glass, it'll give you a little bit more control over certain things. So there we go. Because I don't really need to follow the tray, because the glass already follows the tray. There you go. You can see it following there. Now, I think I did one undo too many. Yeah. So my anim control needs to be parented to this. Boop. So the glass is already following the tray, which means the hand is going to follow all of that. But now as the glass picks up, the hand follows the glass right there. There we go. I am so excited for my 2024's new auto rotation order feature. I'm so excited for it. It looks so cool. So now as the character picks up the glass, let's kind of go over here. And let's see what got left behind. Something got left behind. Made a constraint. Okay. No. This one. There we go. Something weird happened there. So now when we have this, as I'm animating this glass getting put down, and Animated Paul, thank you so much for the sub. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, I really appreciate that. And chocolate mayonnaise, I'm going to go through questions in just a little bit. I'm going to just finish this constraint setup first. We shouldn't have too much more to go. So now, as that hand goes off here, I can just easily animate that following the glass. And then from there, if I need to, I can make adjustments because I've got that anim control. And I set a key here before I set a key there. Okay, cool. Make sure my constraints are still on. It's always good to make sure your constraints are on when you set a key, at least for that first key after you make a constraint. Okay. Cool. So with that, now I can easily adjust the hand. So maybe as she puts down the glass, once again, we might want that pivot point to be slightly offset. So maybe something there. So now I can just pivot that on the edge. But on top of that, I can take my hand and just adjust the finger pose right there ever so slightly. Just like that. So by having those pivot points where I need them, it makes doing all of these small hand adjustments and finger adjustments much easier. I can just have the character make these slight shifts and then boop, it lines up. Everything's nice and easy. Is it messy? Yes. So you keep track of what things are. It can be a little bit hectic. I'm making the locators really big here. You don't have to. You could make them much smaller if you wanted to. But essentially what I'm doing here is just making a system that is very easy for me to just rearrange things. Now, we have to get this hand to follow the tray. So let's go back to frame 10 here and okay. How do we get the hand to follow the tray now? Well, first we have to unlink it from the glass. And there's two ways we will do this. The first is when the character lets go of the glass, we just turn off the entire constraint setup right at the wrist here. So I select the wrist, turn that blend parent off, the hand is free, it does its own thing. So it lifts off and it goes to grab on. Nice and easy, that's pretty much it. So you just turn that blend parent on and off whenever the hand should be free. Good. But what about when it needs to hold on to the tray? So let's kind of move that tray back up here and needs to grab onto the edge. This is where my locator system, because I have this lock, I can just create a switch. So this lock up here, right there, is currently following the glass. We can see this if we look at our constraint right here, is following the glass offset control. Well, I can just add another constraint. So right here on frame 10, I'm going to take the tray right here. I'm going to constrain the left hand lock to it. So constrain parent. And now you can see that the left hand lock locator is constrained to both the glass and the, in this case, the offset for the tray. So what does that mean? Well, now that means that if I move the tray, things follow. And if I move the glass, things follow. It's following both at the same time. Well, that's not quite what we want. It's getting there. What we need to do now is we need to adjust the weight. These attributes right here. So this is the weight of the object it is following. How much percentage is it following that object? Right now it's following both evenly. Value of 1 for each one. So at the beginning here, I want her, it's going to be messy here because suddenly everything's going to be screwed up. But all I need to do is at the beginning, she is just following the glass. There's no tray. So I'm going to take this attribute here, just set that to 0. Done. Now you'll notice that that whole beginning is back to working right there. So let's key that right there. Key selected right through there. Now I'm just going to do this over one frame. Usually that's when you want to, how fast you want to do switches. Once she lets go of the glass, she now has to hold on to the tray. Well, I just turn off the weight of the glass, turn on the weight of the tray, and now let's go to frame 10 here. And I can now just reposition my hand right through here. Let's make sure I set some keys. Okay. So I'm going to take my anim control and just place that on the tray. Right there. So the anim control is right on the edge of the tray. I can take my offset to put the hand right where it needs to be. Right there. And now her hand is following the tray. And the glass is free. So just by taking that lock control, I can now switch the hand to follow whatever I need it to be. It could be grabbing the tray. She could be then grabbing a knife. She could then grab another glass to put on the thing. Maybe grabs a lemon to start making another drink, a glass shaker. Whatever it is, I can just switch that and just have a whole bunch of different objects here that I have that lock onto, and I don't have to redo an entire constraint setup for every single time she grabs onto something. And I still have the ability to adjust those pivot points and still animate it however I want. So it's complicated at first, but it saves a ton of time. So with that, let's actually get this hand here. It's kind of bothering me. So I'm just gonna move this in place. I should do some hand poses, but meh. Not the goal of this demo. Okay, so now at the end here, we've got that tray. And she can do whatever she wants with that tray and just move it around. And we get a little dance right there. Aha, done. I can animate it, all of that good stuff. But there's one last thing that needs to happen. Let's take everything here. Not break her elbow. Okay, one last thing that needs to happen here. And that is she needs to have that tray follow her chest so that if I'm animating her and turning her around, I'm not having to try and animate this tray rotating with the body. I could. And honestly, if it's subtle enough, I would just do it by hand. If the character is just doing a small rotation, it's not going to be that hard to just match it close enough and just do it by hand. Doing a whole new constraint setup is going to be an extra pain for that. But if your character is going to be like, oh, and just like doing a little jig or doing a whole bunch of rotations, or maybe like she takes the tray and oh, shoot, and then she has to like scurry to the kitchen and like just in a big rush and like weave around other customers. I don't want to have to try and animate that tray doing all of these rotations while also sticking to her body. That's going to be a pain. So we can do another quick constraint. That's the word I'm looking for. You'd think I've been doing constraints this whole time. That's not the word that would escape my brain. So in this case, for this shot, she's going to be holding it close to her upper chest. So that's the control I'm going to be using as our kind of guide here. So I want it to follow that control. Okay. Well, once again, we just look at our drawing. So we need 3 more locators. So create locator. And this is why I love doing these types of drawings, because when you're just trying to do this manually and just like off the top of your head, it's very easy to lose track of what you need to do, of which step is next. By doing this, you can just break it down, just follow those steps and just keep going. So this one, let's do this. What color would be good? I'm not a fan of white or yellow. Purple? Yeah. Maybe we'll do gray. So let's duplicate that and name them. And again, naming is very important. Otherwise, you're just going to have, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 locators, and you're not going to know which one's which. So this is the tray lock. This is the tray anim. And then this is the tray offset. Okay, so lock. This is just going to be the thing that controls this to the body. So all I need to do is I'm going to constrain it to the upper chest here. I'm going to match the transform. You don't really have to, but I like to. And I'm just going to put it behind the body here, just so it's easy to find. Now the anim, this is where I want the pivot point to be. Where do I want to animate this from? Well, if she's holding it to her body, I have a few choices. If she's actually got it pressed against her body, I can rotate it from her body. So I could put this right up against her chest and rotate it from there. Or I could keep it further away from the tray, or away from the body and on the tray, and rotate it from there. Both could work. Let's just do the body for now. So I'm going to match the transforms. And then I am going to move this forward and right there. Now I actually posed this character out using the IK controls, so things are not going to quite line up here, just because the IK controls were a little quicker. But let's just put that right there. And then the offset control, this is the offset for the tray, so I can just place this at the tray. So select the tray, match transforms, there we go. Now we just need to set this up once again. So the tray gets constrained to this locator right here. Locator, then the tray, constrain, parent, right there. Now you'll notice that if I do this, it's going to break everything before it. Why? Why did it break? Because I've now got a constraint there. And it's essentially going to turn on across the entire shot and break the tray throughout everything. All I need to do is turn that constraint off, and there we go. So now at the beginning, it's fine. She grabs onto here, the constraint turns on. Then at this point, the tray is going to be following that locator. That locator is going to be following the anim locator, which is the one on her chest right now. So child, then parent, right there. Then the anim follows the lock, right there. And then the lock is constrained to the chest, right here. So chest to locator, constrain parent, right there. Done. So now, at the beginning here, everything works fine. I can animate the tray. Everything works. At the very beginning, I can animate the tray. The glass follows the tray. The hand follows the glass. As she picks it up, the hand follows the glass through all of this. So just whoop, goes down. She lets go. I can now animate the hand just going off on its own, picking up. She comes back here, grabs the tray. Now both hands are following the tray right there. And then at the very end, the tray will follow the chest, which means that as I animate the spine here and have the character moving around, we get that. And I can have the whole character go off and run off with this tray without having to do a whole bunch of extra motion, while still being able to animate the tray around, either using this, or if I want to rotate it from her chest, doing this. So I have that full control, and it just follows however I need it to follow. And there we have it. So, is it messy? Yes, very much so. There's locators everywhere. It's a mess. But now we can start cleaning things up. For example, I know that I'm not going to be using the locators to animate the tray to her chest until the very end. It's just not going to happen until then. So I can just take my locators right here, just turn off that visibility and key it right there. So just turn it off until it's needed. Right there. Same thing with the, let's see, the tray, left hand lock. Left hand lock is going to stay there the whole time. Essentially, right hand lock is going to stay there the whole time. But then the glasses, we can turn those off. So as it goes through, we lose all those locators on the glass right there. So we can start to clean up and simplify certain things. Now, the other thing we can do is we don't always need to see every single locator. So for example, the lock locator here, that's holding the right hand and the glass to the tray. Once I have it set up, I don't need to see it. I can easily select it in my outliner here. Now the problem is if I turn this off, I also lose everything that's underneath it. So right here, for example, if I turn the visibility off, you'll notice that all the constraints for the other hand holding underneath the tray are gone. Well, that's not great, because now if I need to animate that hand, how do I do that? Well, if you want to hide something without affecting anything else, just select it, go into the attribute editor, and you can just turn off its visibility right here. And let's see, where is my locators disappeared. Okay, there they are. So we've got that. I can take this one up here. I was selecting the wrong one. That would make a big difference. So yeah, so I turn this off and you can see how everything disappears. If I go in here and turn off visibility, that one disappeared now up here without affecting any of the others down here. So now I can just hide those lock locators, because honestly, they're just there hidden just to keep things locked in place. They're not doing anything. I'm not animating them. They're just there. So I can just hide them if I don't need them. When I need to bring them back, poof, they're there. And there we go. Or more likely, I can just select them in the outliner, and there we go. I can just make whatever adjustments I need right there. So I can start simplifying things quite a bit right through there. So my animation is a mess right now, but there we go. We now have a constraint set up that is going to allow us to easily animate this however we need, where the character can do all of this complex picking up, and all of the pivot points are where I need them to be, so I can get the finest detail of polish with minimal effort, literally seconds worth of animation versus minutes or hours worth of fighting. I've got the hands switching and doing all of this stuff, and none of it should really hinder my animation. The key here, though, is you need to keep track of what you're doing. Keep track of your locators, keep track of which controls you're using when. That's the tricky part. This is where naming things is very, very important. The other thing that I love to do in Maya is, for whenever I have certain keys turned on, so let's say, for example, at the beginning here, up to frame 4, let's say, I know that the left hand is going to be controlled by the glass right there. So I could just select that range, add a bookmark right here, that's this orange button, and then I can just put left hand to glass right there. And then that tells me, okay, keep track of that. And if ever I need to double check right there, I can just see which ranges I have right through there. So I can just easily see in my outliner, where do I have my constraints turning on and off, and which order I need them to be in. So yeah, that's the demo. Hopefully that made sense. I know it's the final product. We don't really have animation, so it's hard to see if actually working. But essentially, this is going to get you what you would need. And in terms of applying this to any other constraint setup, the big thing is plan it out. That's the big thing. Like, you saw how we're dealing with a lot of locators. 11 locators, was it? We're dealing with all of that, a ton of parenting, a ton of constraints. But because I had it all written down, I can just easily just look over. Oh, I need another locator here. Oh, I need a constraint here. I need it in this order. And I'm not fighting things. I'm not guessing or having to rebuild things halfway through. Now, like I said at the beginning, when you're first starting out, it's going to be hard to plan things out when you don't know how they work. So it's going to take some time to learn that. But once you do, it is well worth your time, and you're going to be able to make complex setups much faster. Like, I could have this character just walking through the bar, weaving in and out, grab that glass, lift it up, do a whole extra maneuver before putting it down, get that nice rotation in there. I could do a ton of complex stuff with little work. I'm not getting weird sliding. I'm not getting all of this just headache through there.